They said I didn't need the ring anymore. It's just gathering dust. They laughed. But it was the last gift my husband gave me before he died. And when I found out they'd pawned it for a weekend getaway, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I called a lawyer. And by the time I was done, their dream home had a brand new owner. Me. I always knew I was just a convenience to them. An extra babysitter when the nanny canceled. A backup cook when the caterer was too expensive. A wallet they didn't have to thank. My son and his wife made that painfully clear over time. But I tried to see the good in it. I told myself, at least I get to be near my grandchildren. At least there's some love left in this house. I should have listened to my gut a long time ago. Ever since I moved into their home 3 years ago. After my husband passed, I've tried to carry my weight. I paid for renovations. They said they'd reimburse me for. I picked the kids up from school, helped with homework, cleaned the kitchen when the maid didn't show. I didn't ask for rent, for recognition, or even for space. All I asked was that they treat me, and my things, with basic respect. Apparently, even that was too much. It started small. Little things would go missing. A vase here, a picture frame there. My sewing machine disappeared once, and they blamed the movers. But I let it go. I thought maybe I misplaced it myself. I even offered to replace it, just to avoid conflict. But last week they crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I had just returned from my morning walk when I noticed my jewelry box sitting strangely askew on my dresser. It was old, the same one my mother gave me when I was 16. But I always kept it locked. I felt the latch with trembling fingers. Unlatched. I opened it and felt my stomach fall through the floor. My wedding ring, the one my husband Harold gave me on our 40th anniversary, was gone. Not the costume jewelry, not the little trinkets from flea markets, or gifts from church friends. The ring, a platinum band with a single emerald stone. He picked it out himself, had it engraved on the inside with the words, "Still yours, still always." I ran to my son's wife, who was lounging in the sunroom with her iPad. "I can't find my wedding ring," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It was in my jewelry box." She didn't even look up. "Maybe it fell behind the dresser." "No," I replied, shaking. "It was locked." That's when she finally looked at me. Her eyes narrowed, and then she smirked. "Oh, that," she said casually. "We pawned it." Just like that, like she was talking about a pack of gum. I blinked, thinking surely I'd misheard her. "You, what?" "It was just sitting there collecting dust," she said. "I figured you didn't wear it anymore. Besides, we needed cash for the Tahoe trip. You weren't using it." She wasn't even ashamed. She didn't apologize. She justified it. I stood there absolutely still, because if I moved, if I spoke, I was afraid I'd scream. She didn't even notice. She turned back to her iPad and kept scrolling. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the empty velvet space where the ring once sat. And I realized something with terrifying clarity. They didn't think of me as a person, not someone with memories, not someone with grief, not someone whose pain mattered. I was just furniture. But furniture doesn't hire lawyers. And I did. You see, I may be 75 and I may walk a little slower now, but I didn't spend 40 years building a life with my husband just to let these two termites eat away at what's left of it. What they didn't know, what no one in this house ever bothered to ask, is that I never signed over the deed to the property when Harold and I helped them buy it. Years ago, when they said they couldn't afford a down payment, Harold and I agreed to help under one condition: the house would stay in my name until it was fully paid off. And wouldn't you know, it never was. Harold set up the paperwork so neatly. I had the title. I had the documentation, and I had been paying the property tax for years, not out of obligation, but out of love. I never said a word about it. I never used it to hold anything over their heads. But now they were about to learn what ownership really meant. The first step was quiet. I visited the county clerk's office and requested copies of the deed and title. Everything was still in my name, just like I thought. I didn't make a scene. I didn't confront them. I waited. I planned. I visited a family lawyer, a sharp older woman who looked like she'd eaten people like my daughter-in-law for breakfast. "They pawned your ring?" she asked, after I told her everything. I nodded, holding back tears. She closed the folder slowly. "You want my advice?" "Yes." "Good. Let's make sure their next mortgage payment goes to you." That night, I smiled for the first time in days, because I wasn't just taking revenge. I was taking back everything they thought I didn't deserve. The days after that meeting with the lawyer felt like a storm brewing under a calm sky. On the surface, nothing had changed. I still made coffee for myself in the morning. I still folded the children's laundry when I passed the basket. I even smiled politely when my daughter-in-law passed me in the hallway, her eyes flicking past me like I was wallpaper. But underneath, I was counting the days. My lawyer had filed the proper notice. She sent a formal letter to my son and his wife, not to the house, but to their personal email and work addresses. The subject line was clear: "Notice of change in property payment structure." That's lawyer speak for, you're no longer homeowners, you're tenants, rent's due. But they didn't see it coming. Not yet. 2 mornings later, I heard them fighting in the kitchen. "I told you to read your emails," my son snapped. "And I told you I was busy planning the Tahoe trip." I sat calmly on the patio with my tea, watching the sun stretch its fingers over the lawn. They hadn't spoken a full sentence to me in 3 days. That suited me just fine. I was done pretending we were a family. They burst out the back door a few minutes later, still arguing. "You knew she still had her name on the house. I thought we refinanced. You said you'd take care of it." They stopped when they saw me sitting there. My son's face was flushed red. His wife looked like she had just swallowed a lemon. I lifted my cup slightly. "Good morning, Mom," my son said, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" "Of course," I said sweetly. Always nice to feel included. He winced but sat down across from me. "Look, this is obviously a misunderstanding. The house stuff, the paperwork. We can fix it." I tilted my head. "Fix it?" "Well," he said, avoiding eye contact, "we didn't think you'd want to be involved with all the financial stuff." "Oh, I didn't," I said, "until someone decided to pawn my wedding ring." My daughter-in-law rolled her eyes. "We said we'd pay it back." I looked at her calmly. "You never said anything. You justified it." "There's a difference." That shut her up for once. My son leaned forward. "We just need a little time. We'll get things in order, and maybe we can transfer things properly. Just don't make this more complicated." That was the moment. The moment I realized they still didn't get it. They thought this was leverage, a power play. They thought if they begged nicely, I'd back down. But I wasn't bluffing. "I already spoke to the lawyer," I said. "You'll be receiving a revised lease agreement. Going forward, you'll be tenants. The monthly rate will reflect current market value." My daughter-in-law's jaw dropped. "You're charging us to live here?" "No," I said. "I'm charging you to live in my home. You can sign the lease or find a new place. That's up to you." "You can't do this," my son said. "This is our house." I sipped my tea. "You should have thought of that before you treated me like a guest." He stood up, shaking. "We took you in." "No," I said, standing up too. "I took you in. And I did it out of love. But now I'm doing what I should have done 3 years ago. Setting boundaries. They left the patio in a storm of sputtered curses and slammed doors. That evening, I heard them in the office, rifling through drawers, probably trying to find the title. They wouldn't find it. My lawyer had already moved it into her firm's possession for safekeeping. I didn't trust anything in that house anymore, not even a locked drawer. The next day, I had the locks on my bedroom door changed, not to be petty, to be safe. I also bought myself a new jewelry box. It was smaller, empty, except for one simple band I wore again. Not the emerald ring. That was gone forever. Sold to strangers who didn't know the story behind it. But this ring, this was the one Harold gave me when we first got married. It was a plain gold band. A little scratched now, but it still fit. Still felt like his hand was there. That night, my granddaughter knocked softly on my door. She's only 10, smart as a whip, too young to be part of any of this, but old enough to see it unfold. "Can I come in?" she asked. Always, she sat on the edge of my bed, swinging her legs. "Daddy and Mommy are mad," she said. "I know, sweetheart. They said you're being mean." I paused. "Do you think I'm being mean?" She thought for a moment. "No, I think you're being serious." That made me smile. Sometimes grown-ups confuse boundaries with cruelty, but it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it makes people uncomfortable. She nodded, then hugged me. "I like it when you're around." "I like it when I'm around too," I said, holding her tight. "And I'm going to make sure that when I am, I'm treated right." The following week, the lease was formally delivered. It gave them 60 days to agree or vacate. No drama, no eviction, just business. They tried a few tricks, delayed payments, ignored the email, but the lawyer was one step ahead of them. After the grace period, she sent notice of intent to sell. If they didn't comply, I'd put the house on the market. That's when they panicked. They finally sat down with me, trying to negotiate. "We didn't mean to hurt you," my son said. "We just didn't think." "You didn't think at all," I interrupted. "And now, for once, you're facing consequences." "Where will we go?" his wife cried. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I imagine you'll figure it out. You always said I should be more independent." "Maybe it's your turn." That was the last real conversation we had before the house was listed. I found a buyer in 2 weeks, a lovely couple, just starting out. They reminded me of Harold and me in our early days. Hopeful, respectful, kind. When the final papers were signed and the check cleared, I stood on the porch one last time and looked out at the garden I planted myself. The roses were blooming, fiery red, just like the ones Harold gave me on our anniversary. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because I was walking away with more than just a check. I was walking away with dignity. I don't storm around the house or throw dramatic fit. That's not my style. Never has been. When Harold was alive, he used to say, "You're the calm before and after the storm, Alice. Anyone who underestimates you just doesn't know you yet." He was right. I don't raise my voice, I raise my standards. And my standards were rising quickly. After visiting the lawyer and confirming that the deed and title to the house were still mine, I started noticing all the little things I used to overlook. The groceries I bought with my own card that somehow ended up in their fridge without so much as a thank you. The gas money I gave when they forgot their wallets. The way my daughter-in-law kept introducing me to her friends as the live-in babysitter, laughing like it was a cute joke. I wasn't living with them. They were living off of me. And now they had stolen the one thing that meant the most. The last piece of Harold that hadn't already been boxed up or buried. I didn't care about getting the ring back from the pawn shop anymore. I cared about the principle, about the audacity, about how they rolled their eyes when I asked for respect, and how I was about to show them exactly who owned the ground beneath their feet. I started keeping notes, every little expense I covered, every time I picked up the kids from school, every time they left the house for a work meeting while I stayed behind with two hyper kids and no break. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was doing it for clarity. For the first time in 3 years, I wanted to see the truth of how I'd been treated, and how I'd allowed myself to stay silent for too long. It was like peeling back wallpaper and finding mold beneath it. Ugly, hidden, and far more dangerous than I realized. The kids didn't know what was happening, of course. They loved me. They'd run to me after school, their little faces lighting up when they saw I'd made peanut butter cookies or grilled cheese the way they liked it. No crusts, cut diagonal. One evening, my granddaughter, Emily, sat beside me on the couch while I was sewing up a tear in her backpack. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom says you're old-fashioned." I paused, needle halfway through the fabric. "She said that, huh? But I think old-fashioned means you're just better at stuff." I kissed the top of her head, holding back tears. She was too young to know the weight of those words, but I felt it like a stone in my chest. I didn't tell her that her mom had thrown out my sewing machine last year, claiming it was clunky junk. I didn't tell her that they rolled their eyes when I made dinner from scratch, or reused containers to avoid waste. No, I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and said, "Well, sweetie, I'll take that as a compliment." The next morning, I met with the lawyer again. We were going over documents I hadn't touched since Harold passed. Bank statements, mortgage agreements, the clause about partial ownership and my remaining legal rights. She leaned forward, tapping a highlighted section. "Because the property was never fully transferred, and you're the only one on the title, you can technically sell it." My breath caught. "Wait, you mean I could actually sell this house?" She nodded. "As long as you notify them properly and give a standard vacate notice, yes. You'd have every legal right. And depending on how much you want to push it, we could even recoup some of your financial contributions from their failure to reimburse." I stared down at the paper. I'd expected a slap on the wrist, maybe a stern letter or a legal threat. But this was power. Real documented, legal power. I left that office with a manila folder clutched in my arms like a shield. Back at home, the silence felt louder than ever. My son wasn't home yet, but my daughter-in-law was in the kitchen, sipping from a mug I bought and scrolling through her phone. "You're out early," she said without looking up. "Had errands," I replied. "You didn't pick up eggs." I looked at her flatly. "That's not on my list anymore." She blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me, I'm not your grocery runner, or your maid, or your jewelry supplier." She rolled her eyes and waved me off like I was being dramatic. "Oh my God, are you still upset about the ring? We needed that trip. It's not like you wear it." I didn't answer. I just walked away, because what I was planning wouldn't need raised voices or slammed doors. It would need a signature, and I had one hell of a pen. I met with the real estate agents the next morning. A sharp young man named Darren, with an even sharper suit. He walked through the house with me, complimenting the renovations and asking how soon I wanted it listed. "As soon as the notice period ends," I said. He glanced up. "So they're still living here?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "But not for long." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do that?" "It's pretty cold." I looked him dead in the eye. "They pawned my dead husband's ring without asking. I've paid for half of this house, and I've been treated like a burden in every room of it. So no, it's not cold. It's justice." To his credit, Darren nodded. "Fair enough. I'll start paperwork." Over the next week, I prepared everything quietly. I boxed up my own belongings. I found a small rental condo nearby. Just enough space for me, with a garden patch I could tend to in peace. I bought myself a new sewing machine. And I printed the vacate notice on crisp official paper. The day I handed it to my son was the day his jaw almost hit the floor. What do you mean we have to leave? I said, folding my hands. The house is mine. And I've decided to sell it. You'll have 30 days to find somewhere else. He stared at the paper like it was written in fire. You can't be serious. I tilted my head. I'm very serious, and I'm very done. Behind him, his wife burst out. This is illegal. It's not, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I checked. I left the room before they could argue further. Let them yell at the walls. I had a garden to look forward to. That night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully and alone, with no footsteps stomping above. No late-night parties. No whispered insults drifting down the hall. Just quiet. Just me. And it was beautiful. You would think that handing someone a legal eviction notice would burn a bridge, but it turns out bridges don't burn when the other side never cared to build them in the first place. After I gave my son and daughter-in-law the 30-day vacate notice, there was silence for 2 full days. No screaming, no apology. Just the sound of doors closing harder than usual, and conversations halting when I entered a room, and honestly, I preferred it that way. The third morning, I found a note slid under my door. It was short. Mom, I don't know why you're doing this. You always said family sticks together. You're turning your back on your grandkids. Think about what kind of message this sends. David. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the handwriting for a long time. So neat, so rehearsed, just like the life he built. Perfect on the surface, hollow underneath. I didn't respond. I folded the paper and placed it gently into my manila folder, right between the deed and the realtor contract. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. Not a soft one, a demanding one. When I opened it, my daughter-in-law stood there with her arms crossed and sunglasses still on, even though we were indoors. We're not leaving, she said flatly. You are, I said just as flatly. David's talking to a lawyer. You can't just sell the house from under us. I'm not selling it from under you, I said. I'm giving you notice. A legal one. She scoffed. And you think you're going to walk off with the profits? My eyes narrowed. Yes. I am the owner. That's just a technicality, she hissed. We made this house what it is. You didn't even pay for half the upgrades. I paid in groceries, in babysitting, in staying silent. She had no comeback for that, just turned on her heel and muttered something under her breath that I didn't bother to catch. A week passed. Boxes started to pile up near the stairs, half-heartedly packed. I could tell they didn't believe I would follow through, that they thought I was bluffing. But I wasn't bluffing. I had been silent for too long. Now, every quiet step I took was louder than their shouting had ever been. At night, I would walk the backyard alone. I'd trace the little stone path Harold and I had laid together in the early days. I'd water the wilted herbs that had been neglected for years. I'd talk to the moon like Harold was still listening. I think you'd be proud of me, I whispered one night. You always said I waited too long to speak up. I could almost hear him laugh. Took you long enough, sweetheart. 2 weeks in, my son finally knocked on my door again. This time he looked tired. Not angry, just worn down. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded and motioned to the dining table. He sat down across from me, rubbing his hands together. I don't get it, Mom. Why now? I kept my voice soft. Because I finally saw it for what it was. You weren't helping me by letting me live here. I was helping you, and you forgot that. That's not fair. You let her pawn my wedding ring. He flinched. The words hit like a brick. I didn't know until afterward. But you didn't stop her from using the money for a vacation. He had no answer, just stared at the tabletop like it would offer him grace. I raised you better than that, I said gently. But you didn't protect me. So now I'm protecting myself. He wiped his face. So what happens after you sell the house? You just cut us out? I sighed. I'm not cutting anyone out. I'm cutting the cord. I'll still be here, but on my own terms, not as your live-in servant, not as a free nanny. As your mother, as a person. It was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I guess we'd better start packing. The day the photographer came to take the real estate photos, my daughter-in-law stomped around the house like a thundercloud. She left dishes in the sink, threw laundry across the hallway, and left the living room in chaos. I said nothing. Then, once she was gone, I straightened every pillow, wiped every counter, and opened every curtain. Sunlight flooded the space, and for the first time in ages, the house looked like it belonged to me again. The photographer, a sweet young woman named Marissa, gave me a curious smile. Are they okay with you selling? They don't really get a say, I said calmly. She grinned. Good for you. Within a week, we had 3 offers, all over asking price. The market was hot. And my home, was just the right mix of charm and modern. The irony was, all the upgrades they had done to modernize the place were now lining my pockets. The day I signed the final papers was the same day I booked the moving truck for me. I had already secured a sweet little place, 2 towns over, a quiet cottage with a fenced yard, hardwood floors, and a sunroom just begging for houseplants and rocking chairs. Before I left, I placed a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a final letter and a check. Small, just enough to cover a deposit somewhere else. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted space. They could keep their pride. I was keeping my peace. The day I moved out, no one helped me carry boxes, and that was okay. The movers did just fine. I supervised with my clipboard in hand, and my head held high. The last thing I packed was the photo of Harold and me on our wedding day, him in a navy suit, me in a simple white dress, wearing the ring they thought they could pawn away, without consequence. Some things you can't replace, but you can make peace with letting go. The new place smelled like wood polish and lavender when I walked in. Quiet, clean, safe. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in my new sunroom, watching the birds flutter in the trees outside. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't holding my breath. I was breathing again. And it felt like freedom. You learn a lot about people once you stop doing things for free. I hadn't been gone 2 weeks before the calls started. At first, it was just David, my son, asking if I'd left anything in the attic. Then it was my daughter-in-law texting to say the neighbors were asking about my new address. But by the 3rd week, the tone changed. Mom, the boys miss you. Don't you want to come visit? Could you maybe help us out for just 1 weekend while we handle some errands? Also, just wondering, what'd you end up doing with the money from the sale? That last one made me laugh. Not out loud, just in that slow, knowing way where you press your lips together and shake your head. The house sold for a good sum, more than I'd expected. I paid off the remainder of the mortgage, which they thought they were paying, and I bought my little cottage outright. No loans, no debts, no strings. I'd even started fixing up the sunroom, added a few shelves, some cushions, and a little vintage sewing machine from a second-hand shop. Not to use, not yet, just to feel like something was mine again. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the silence, the peace. I hadn't realized how much noise there'd been. Footsteps pounding up the stairs at midnight, arguments muffled through thin walls, dishes clanging in the sink. Doors never quite closed gently. Now the quiet felt like a reward. And then, Just when I thought I'd heard the last of the drama, I got a letter, not an email. Not a text, a typed letter in a cream envelope. Delivered by certified mail, from their lawyer. Apparently they were contesting the sale. They said I took advantage of an unclear ownership structure, and that I had sold the house without fair compensation to the occupants who had financially contributed to the property. I read it 3 times before I even blinked. Then, I made myself a fresh cup of peppermint tea, sat down at my tiny wooden table, and called Eleanor. Eleanor had been my friend since high school, retired now, but sharp as a tack, and formerly a real estate agent with over 30 years of experience. She laughed so hard when I read the letter aloud. She had to put me on speakerphone. "Oh, please," she said. "They never added their names to the deed. You could have handed them an invoice for back rent if we're being honest." I exhaled. That's what I thought. But I needed to hear it from someone who wouldn't just pat me on the head. "No head pats here," Eleanor said. "Just good legal sense." She connected me with a real estate attorney named Paul, who looked over everything. He confirmed exactly what I already knew. They didn't have a legal leg to stand on. No co-ownership, no equity claim, no signed agreements, and no lease. They were technically guests. Entitled guests. But guests nonetheless. Paul sent back a politely worded response, referencing property law, confirmed deed transfer, and notice timelines. It was clean, ironclad, and just dry enough to make it sting. I signed it with a steady hand and slept like a baby that night. By the time the next month rolled around, they had stopped trying to contact me. No more letters, no more guilt-tripping texts. Just silence. I think they realized something crucial, that all the emotional leverage they used to hold over me had expired. I'd reclaimed it. I'd cashed it in for freedom. And freedom, it turned out, looked like weekly brunches at a cafe with Eleanor, volunteering at the local library on Wednesdays, and sitting in a sun-filled room reading novels from the discount bin, without anyone asking what was for dinner. One afternoon, I received a visit from someone unexpected. My grandson Tyler, 15 years old, all limbs and sneakers, and a slightly worried look in his eyes. He stood at my front gate, holding a small box. "Hi," he said. "Can I come in?" I nodded slowly and opened the latch. We sat on the porch together in silence for a minute, before he slid the box toward me. Inside was my ring. My original wedding ring. "I found it," he said, "in Mom's jewelry drawer. She didn't even bother hiding it. I thought it was gone." I lifted it from the box with trembling hand. The band was scratched. The diamond was gone, replaced with a cheap cubic zirconia. But it was still mine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "They shouldn't have done that." I looked at him, my heart heavy and soft all at once. "It wasn't your fault. I know," he said. "But I think you should know that. I remember what it was like before, when you used to live with us. You were always kind and quiet, but it wasn't fair how they treated you." He looked up at me, eyes watering a little. "I just wanted you to know that I saw." Even if I didn't say anything then, I didn't say anything either. I just reached over and squeezed his hand. After he left, I placed the ring on my sewing table, not to wear, just to keep, as a reminder of what I lost, of what I took back. The next time someone asked me what I did before retiring, I said this: I gave, and gave, and gave, and then I stopped. And that last part, that was the best thing I ever did. There's something they don't tell you about walking away from people you love. It's not just the silence you get used to. It's the peace that replaces the guilt. The 6th week in my cottage, I finally opened the box I'd kept taped shut since I moved. The one with old photo albums, birthday cards, school drawings with "Love You, Nana," scribbled in crayon. For years I'd clung to those scraps like they were life rafts. But now, they felt different, lighter, like memories that had stopped aching. I sorted through each photo slowly. One caught my eye. Thanksgiving 5 years ago, I was holding a pie, smiling through the exhaustion, while David stood behind me on his phone, and Melissa sat on the couch scrolling, the boys barely paying attention. I'd cooked that entire meal, cleaned everything, and no one had even said thank you. I slipped that photo into the fireplace and let it burn, not out of bitterness, out of release. Word had gotten around town about what I did: selling the house, buying my own place, standing up for myself. Most of the women my age were thrilled. About time, they'd say, raising their eyebrows with impressed smiles. But not everyone was kind. At the grocery store one afternoon, a woman I used to know from church stopped me at the end of the produce aisle. "I heard what you did," she said, voice dipped in judgment. "Selling your family's home? Doesn't that seem extreme?" I looked at her, then at the head of lettuce in my hand. "You know what's extreme?" I said calmly. "Living like a housekeeper while your own son tells you you're lucky to have a roof." She blinked, and I smiled. They were only ever guests in that house. I just reminded them of that. Her lips pursed, but she didn't say another word. I didn't need to justify it. Not anymore. A month later, I received a formal notice in the mail. David and Melissa were moving. The house, my old house, was too expensive for them to maintain on their own. Without my retirement income covering bills, taxes, and repairs, it was bleeding them dry. They couldn't refinance. They'd missed payments. The bank had begun foreclosure proceedings. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but mostly I felt quiet. I had given them the keys to a good life, literally, and they'd thrown it away chasing control. Now they'd lose it all, not because I wanted revenge, but because they couldn't live without taking from others. Eleanor stopped by later that day with a box of fresh rolls. I handed her the letter and watched her read it in silence. "They thought you were the safety net," she said after a beat. "Turns out, you were the foundation." I nodded, and without the foundation, the whole thing crumbled. That weekend, I received another visitor. This time, Melissa. She arrived alone without warning, wearing oversized sunglasses, and holding a bag of pastries like a peace offering. I let her stand on my porch for a long moment before opening the door. She took the glasses off. "I just wanted to talk." I stepped aside. 5 minutes. She looked around my little cottage, taking in the cozy decor, the sun streaming through the windows, the quiet. "It's nice," she said. I didn't respond. She placed the bag on the table. "I brought lemon scones. You used to like those." "I still do," she nodded, lips pressed tight. Then the tears started. Not loud or dramatic, just soft, embarrassed ones. "I didn't realize how much you did for us," she whispered, "until it was all gone." I stayed quiet. "I said awful things," she continued. "Took things that weren't mine, including your ring. I can't undo that, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was thinner, tired, probably from the stress of packing, moving, unraveling all the mess they'd created. "I appreciate the apology," I said simply. "I understand if you can't forgive me." I thought about that. Then I said, "Forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were." She nodded slowly. "I know." We sat in silence for a moment before I stood up. "I wish you well," I said gently. "But I've built a life here, one that doesn't require me to be everyone's doormat." She nodded again, and stood to leave. As she reached the door, she turned. "Tyler wants to visit again. Is that okay?" My heart softened. "Yes," I said. "He's always welcome." Later that evening, I sat by the fireplace and held the ring Tyler had returned weeks ago. I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Then I remembered something. Years ago, I'd once imagined giving that ring to my granddaughter. If I ever had one, I never did. But I could repurpose it, melt it down, have it reset into a pendant, something new, something mine. So that's what I plan to do. By the end of the month, David and Melissa were gone, moved into a small apartment near the edge of town. The boys switched schools, their lives reduced to something they once would have mocked me for living. And me? I'd never been freer. I taught a class at the library once a week. Life skills for young adults. Nothing fancy. Just a few curious teens learning about budgeting, boundaries, and baking bread. I brought cookies to every session, and every time they called me ma'am, I smiled a little inside. One girl asked if I had kids of my own. I do, I said, but I learned not all family deserves access to your heart. She blinked at that, but I added, some do, and that's who you open the door for. People think revenge always looks like fire and fury, but sometimes it looks like a quiet breakfast, the clink of a spoon in a mug of tea, a soft smile as the sun rises through lace curtains. Sometimes revenge is peace, because peace means you're no longer playing their game. It's been a year since I walked out of that house, a year since they took my ring, and I took their mortgage and doubled it with interest. A year since I stopped asking for respect and started demanding dignity, and I'm finally starting to feel like me again. The cottage is mine, in every way now. The title's in my name. The garden's full of marigolds and cherry tomatoes, and the kitchen always smells like cinnamon or fresh herbs. I've hosted book club here, baked birthday cakes, and even held a little quilting circle once. The kind of quiet life that used to be considered valuable before people started measuring worth in likes and square footage. My days are simple, my life is full, and more importantly, one morning I'm standing at the mailbox when a familiar car pulls into my driveway. Melissa steps out. But she's not alone. Tyler, my oldest grandson, follows her, lanky now, 17 and sweet-faced, with his father's eyes but not his coldness. He carries a small duffel bag and a quiet smile. I hope it's okay, Melissa says, a little breathless. He wants to spend the summer here, and I thought you'd want to say yes yourself. I look at Tyler. His eyes meet mine. Please? He asks. Just the summer. I nod. The guest room's got fresh sheets, but you're doing the dishes if you eat my food. He grins. Deal. Those weeks are the best I've had in years. Tyler helps in the garden, learns to bake bread, and even asks me how I learned to manage money so well. We spend mornings watching the news, afternoons walking by the lake, and evenings playing cards. One night, over warm peach cobbler, he finally asks, "Why'd you leave?" I look at him carefully. They forgot who I was, I say. They treated me like a burden, not a person. Like I didn't deserve privacy, dignity, or even the things that were mine. So I left before I forgot who I was, too. He nods slowly. I think I get it. I reach across the table and squeeze his hand. You will one day. And when you do, remember, no one who loves you will ask you to shrink. Midway through August, David shows up, unannounced. Uninvited. He stands on my porch like he owns it. Which he doesn't. Not anymore. Wearing slacks and a button-down like he's just come from a business meeting. Tyler's out back. I answer the door. David looks at me with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Mom, he says. Mind if we talk? I don't invite him in. I let him talk right there, under the porch light. I've been thinking, he says, about what happened, and I wanted to clear the air. Is that so? He shifts. I realize things were said that shouldn't have been. Melissa feels terrible. Melissa apologized months ago. You didn't. He swallows. Fine. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let things get that far. But it was a stressful time. I mean, we had bills, the boys, and… Stop. He freezes. You're doing it again, I say. Making excuses, dismissing what happened. He blinks. I just thought maybe we could move forward. I fold my arms. You came here because you're in trouble again, didn't you? Silence. You lost the apartment, didn't you? More silence. I'm not here to fix your life, I say softly. I already did that once, and you didn't like it when I stopped. But I'm not coming back, and I'm not give this house. His jaw tightens. It's just a house. No, I say. It's a boundary, one I built with brick and title and peace of mind. And it's staying mine. He leaves in silence, and I don't feel bad. Not this time. In early September, I decide to finally do something with the ring. The one they pawned, the one Tyler brought back. I take it to a jeweler downtown, a kind older man with kind eyes and steady hands. I'd like it melted. I tell him, made into something new. What do you have in mind? He asks. I pull out a folded napkin. On it is a rough sketch, a pendant, a small simple heart, not a romantic one, but something strong, with a tiny sapphire in the center. My birthstone, something for me, I say. Just me. He smiles. I'll make it perfect. When I pick it up a week later, I cry in the car. Not because I'm sad, but because I'm whole. It hangs around my neck now, a reminder that even the things they tried to steal can be remade. That what was once taken can become a symbol of strength. That I too can shine. On the last night of summer, Tyler hugs me tightly. I'll come back next year, he says. You better. I need help with the tomatoes. He grins. Then he does something that surprises me. He takes off a small beaded bracelet from his wrist and places it in my hand. It's silly, he says, but you helped me feel more like me this summer. I wanted to leave you something. I blink back tears. It's not silly, I whisper. It's everything. And just like that, he's gone again. But the cottage stays warm, and so does my heart. They took my ring, thinking it was just a trinket. They treated me like I didn't matter. They laughed when I finally stood up. But I gave them something they weren't ready for. I gave them a lesson. I gave them consequences. And I gave myself the one thing they never could: freedom.